crisis has been defined by a plurality that has never existed in American history before, especially a racial plurality, and by a more liberal, more left-leaning view of the world that is not afraid of change, that is not afraid of abandoning some of the old rules and some of the old traditions that they feel is outdated. And you see this manifested everywhere. So if we go back to some of the things that they've been blamed for example, cruises, they can't afford to go on a cruise because they're broke, because of student debt, because of the financial crisis. Millennials' experience with the financial crisis has also completely shaken their belief and their trust in the financial institutions of the world. As such, they're not taking banking as seriously as previous generations did. They're no longer taking the illusion of homeownership as seriously as the other generations did. They're now extraordinarily weary of being in debt because they're graduating from university saddled with debt, and they're entering a job force where they're being underpaid, where they're being overworked, where they're being expected to do, in some cases, years of internships before they actually get a full-time job. So you can understand their faith. The system that was created for the boomers has simply evaporated. They don't have it. So when a boomer business tries to market something, tries to develop something for a millennial audience, if you do not understand that political, economic, and philosophical gap, you will fail every single time. And you see this in particular in the food industry, their inability to figure out what the zeitgeist of millennials are. You absolutely are seeing this in the financial industry. They're struggling mightily trying to bring in not just millennials as clients, but millennials as employees. The financial world is seeing this sort of drying up of talent from millennials because a lot of millennials are, quite frankly, sickened by financial institutions around the world that are more concerned about profit over people. So to blame millennials is the worst thing and the wrong thing to do, because what should be blamed are these corporations and these businesses' lack of understanding of what millennials and who millennials are, a lack of their ability to adjust their business models, and a failure to understand that every generation has the right to define itself. When I hear people criticize millennials, the one common theme that keeps coming up again and again and again can be summarized basically by, why aren't they doing what's always been done? Why aren't they accepting the values and the systems and the products and the corporations that have always been accepted? Well, the reason why they're not doing it is because every generation gets to look at the world and decide the direction they want to go down, the things they are willing to live with and live without. To enforce that kind of viewpoint on a new generation is not just immoral, it's insane. To walk up to a millennial generation and say you must adhere to and value the things that the boomers adhere to and value is insane. The only thing you can do is give them your advice, is to provide them with a path forward and make a recommendation about the ways you believe works best. But at the end of the day, you give them the wheel and say the road is yours. Drive in the way that makes you happy. Drive in the way that you feel most comfortable with, because you have to take ownership of your journey. Your journey can only be done by you and no one else. Let's remember that it was the boomer generation that gave us global warming. It was the boomer generation that gave us massive national financial debt. It was the boomer generation that is now sucking up all of the resources in our healthcare systems. And it's the millennial generation that's going to have to pay for all of this. So you can understand why, if you're a millennial, you would look around and want to opt out of this system. My recommendation to any business owners out there, any brands out there that are looking to reconnect or connect with millennials is actually very simple. The chasm between millennials and boomers racially is so wide. Philosophically is so wide. Financially is so wide. In terms of how they view the world, millennials tend to view the world in a much more fair way. They believe that everyone should have their piece of the pie. They believe that everyone should have a seat at the table. They believe that everyone should have a fair shot. It is the millennial generation that is leading Black Lives Matter, that is leading a lot of the anti-racist and anti-fascist demonstrations you're seeing across the states right now, that is leading the environmental movement, that is leading the LGBTQ movement right now, that is redefining civil rights for an entire generation and beyond. If you don't realize that this gap is huge and that you have to build a bridge to get to the other side, your business is just going to fail. It will not work. There's no amount of marketing. There's no amount of advertising dollars that you can spend, that you can throw at, that's going to make this problem go away. Because it's not a problem. It's only a problem if you believe that the millennial generation must be subservient to the boomer generation. As soon as you disconnect yourself from that belief, you suddenly start to see ways to reach ahead. If you want to connect with millennials, it's actually very simple. Sit down, talk to them, listen to them. Listen to what their worries are. Listen to what their dreams are. Listen to the kind of world that they want. Listen to the kind of world that they want their children to have. And you'll get an understanding of who they are, what they want, and most importantly, if you want to profit from them, what they need. But don't be surprised whatsoever that the way they look at the world is fundamentally different than the way you look at the world. That what keeps them up at night is fundamentally different than what keeps you up at night. And dear God, stop judging them. They have the right to define themselves. They have the right to define their own journey. They have the right to define their own dreams. You don't get to walk up and tell them their dreams are stupid. You don't get to walk up and tell them that their hopes are stupid. You don't get to walk up and tell them that the kind of world that they want is stupid. Offer them your advice, but after that, again, you give them the wheel because it's their journey to take. Your journey is done. You've already finished your journey. In many cases, boomers have sort of hit the peak of where they're going to be. In many ways, boomers have sort of achieved the world that they wanted. And you got the world that you wanted. It was a world defined by capitalism, consumerism, debt, inequality. That's the world that you guys wanted. That's the world that you guys built. You have it. Now let millennials deal with that world and figure out the world that they want to build. That's all our time today for the Raccoon Club podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you next time.